Hey everyone, welcome back to the RC fire truck build. In this video, we're going to do the transmission and put a steering servo on the steering axle. We installed the steering axle in the last video. If you didn't check that out, be sure to do so. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Let's dig in to putting these front wheels on and then putting a servo. What I'm working on right here is putting the front wheels on the front steering axle. I need to drill some holes through the wheels so that way the stud can actually come through, and then we can put an extended wheel nut to secure it on. Now I can start to prepare for the steering servo. My plan is to mount the steering servo forward facing with the servo horn attached to a steering linkage, and then that steering linkage attached to one of the ends of the steering axle. This will create a push rod system that will allow the truck to steer. I think it's going to work out pretty well. You guys can see how I'm going to do it. A lot of you may be wondering where I'm getting all the parts to work on this truck. Really, to be honest, most of them are coming from Amazon. I find that a lot of the RC products that I can use are available on Amazon, and they're for a pretty good price too. Okay, so it's finally time now that the servo can be mounted up. It took me some time to get the proper measurements for the actual turnbuckle that I wanted to use. The nut and bolt that you see sticking up through the steering axle, that's a temporary one. I did have to order some longer wheel nuts so that way I could have a spacer in between. So I think it's going to work out pretty well. Now it's time to move the chassis of the truck off the table and bring the body in. I wanted to do this because I needed to gut the old electronics and all the old wires that were coming out of there, because I need to have all the room that I can in order to put new electronics. Here you can see that I put a few magnets around the center cap that's located in the middle of the truck. This is going to be the main access point for me to put the batteries into the vehicle. The magnets are there to help keep the cap on while the truck is driving. So now I'm working on the transmission on top of the chassis. I originally thought that I could keep the wheel wells that are on the chassis, but I was wrong. I needed to cut those out so that way I could measure the half shafts for the axle properly. With those wheel wells in place, I couldn't get a proper measurement because of the angle that would have to be made. So I cut the wheel wells out, and then later you'll see that I glued them back on over the axle when it was all put in. It looks good. It's not going to interfere with the drive shafts whatsoever. As I mentioned in the reveal video that this project started with, I'm using a Traxxas Stampede 2-wheel drive transmission. This will have a differential and adjustable half shafts that I will cut down to the proper length, and then we'll have a really reliable transmission that will be strong and have a good amount of speed. Here you can see just how short I had to cut down the half shafts. I also cut a suspension arm from a Traxxas Stampede so that way I have a nice connection to the chassis that is not just through the drive shaft. Finally, with the half shafts cut and fit to the proper size, I can now work on connecting the two stub axle carriers to each other across from the chassis. You can see that I did this by actually taking a turnbuckle with two rod ends and actually connecting the two stub axle carriers through that turnbuckle. Now I can start to take the transmission, open it up, and actually put all the gears inside so that way we can make this thing run. With all of the transmission gears in place, I can now close up the transmission housing and put it back on the chassis of the truck. I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys. Got a lot of stuff done in this episode. We got the whole transmission hooked up. Look at this, we've got the drive shafts coming through to the transmission. The truck is rolling really nicely. I did put the wheel wells back on with just a little bit of hot glue. They're gonna hold fine, I'm not too worried about that. I was originally not going to put them back on, but then once I saw that they could still fit, I think it's gonna be pretty nice that they're back on there. Something to note is that there is a little bit of a bow in the chassis. You can see that the back end is hanging down a little bit. This is going to be fixed when the body goes back on, because you can see that these screws are going to hold the chassis up into the body, so we won't have any of this sag in the back. So right now, if I roll it, you can see these wheels are actually not touching the top of the table, but when I put some force down and the bow is eliminated, you can see that it rolls. It's also turning the main shaft, so that's great. But with that bow, you can see that I can rotate. We've got both wheels are spinning, so that's great. And then moving up to the servo, as you saw in the demonstration, we've actually got really great steering angle here. Once again, I might cut down this bolt. Not too sure, it doesn't really matter, it's really just an aesthetic thing, but I might cut down that bolt. And as far as this motor goes, this is actually an old motor that I had laying around in the shop. It's a Titan 21 turn. It is a high torque motor, something like what you would find in the TRX4. I'm not sure if this motor is going to work. I need to test it before I really fit it in here, but I think it should do the trick. And then one quick look underneath, you can see here how we've got two suspension arms taken off of a Stampede. Of course, these were spares. I didn't take them off of my trucks themselves. And we've got a few screws holding it in. These are the two screws holding into the transmission. And then moving up here, you can see how we have the front axle hooked up. All of this has turned out really great. I'm so happy with how it's looking. Here's just one big shot. This truck is huge. It's going to be really heavy. I'm so glad this is working out. Thanks so much for all your support, guys. Be sure to leave a like and drop a comment if you have any ideas you want to share. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you guys in the next one on the RC Genius.